morning, and welcome to Social Venture Partners Dallas. Today we have our third session of our series, Thinking Globally, Acting Locally. Mental health responds. Today I am delighted to be joined by mental health professionals here locally in the Dallas community. Social Venture Partners is an organization of men and women who bring their time, talent, and financial resources to help grow the capacity of social enterprises, nonprofits, and for-profit for-good businesses in the Dallas community in the North Texas area. Our men and women work very hard to support these organizations that are on the front lines working on systemic change so that they can be the best that they can be and fulfill their missions in our community. We are asking that if you are so inclined to join us on social media, we ask that you share your highlights from today's conversation with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn, and be sure to use the hashtag mental health responds in your post to help spread the word. I wanted to make you aware that the Q&A function is open and we want to hear from you. We have a very large audience, but we will try to get to as many questions as we can, and we will have some follow-ups after the session as well. So please feel free to submit a question about mental health or something a panelist said at any time during the session. And if we can, we will make our best efforts to answer those questions. So today I welcome my panel. It is with great pleasure that I welcome Dr. Harville Hendrix and Dr. Helen LaKelly Hunt, founders of Imago Relationship Therapy and RelationshipsFirst here in Dallas, launched here in Dallas. Dr. Amanpreet Randazzo, who is a licensed clinical psychologist and the founder of AR Psychological Services. I am happy to have Dr. Brad Schwal with us, who is the president and CEO of the Center for Integrative Counseling and Psychology. Marcelina Melvin, an LPC, Director of Program Implementation for Child and Family Policy with the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. Michelle Kinder, LPC, author, speaker, and former Executive Director of the Momentous Institute. I would like to give a shout out to the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute and their Ok2say Campaign, who is helping to co-produce our session today. So I would like to turn my first question to Helen and Harville and have them share a little bit with us about their work in this field, help us understand the kind of experience and what it does to us and to our responses when we feel stressed, when we feel fear, when we feel anxiety, which are common things that we are facing given the recent pandemic. In his amazing book, The Road Less Traveled, Scott talked about his opening line was, "Life is difficult." Helen and Harville, I think for most of us, we are experiencing the difficult way that we have never experienced it before. Talk to us a little bit about the neuroscience involved in what we are experiencing. And I'm going to throw it to you.
How long did you suggest we take?
4 or 5 minutes would be great.
Okay. Well, our work in Dallas was Harville's idea, and I like how you set it up sort of from the global to the local, because the book that Oprah made famous was globally famous, and the dream for Harville was, Helen, let's get this out of the therapy offices and into the public, because this is so simple now. Everyone needs this. So that's our work.
So what we have taken out of the therapy office into the public is what in therapy we call a dialogue, and into the public we've renamed it safe conversations. And what that means is helping people learn to talk without polarizing or criticizing, and to listen to each other without judging, and to be able to connect beyond their differences, which all of us have differences and that won't go away. So what we have been doing with that technology, Safe Conversation, is finding all the ways, all the delivery systems we could on all the social media platforms.
With Tony's help.
With Tony's help and this time, and to just share that technology with the world during this time of the crisis that all of us are saying we have never faced before, a challenge to the human race that has such potential for destruction. And then the added piece of that is the quarantine, which moves us all out of our routines in everyday life, from the workplace home, and from the worship place home, and from the school place home. So everybody is home. And what the rupture of routine does is increase the stress on people who actually care for each other, but who had the space between them to go to work, to go to their congregation, or to go to classrooms. And they don't have that anymore. So we know the stress is spiking, and that means there's an impact on the immune system, and there's all kinds of vulnerabilities that come out of that stress. And relational stress is one of the two major stresses on human beings. The other one is toxins in the environment. So that's what people are facing, and it has serious consequences for their neurochemistry and their brains. And Helen will
So I think
talk
my
about that.
2 or 3 sentences to conclude is that Harville is he's just a genius at how he simplifies communication. And a dialogue, the Safe Conversation dialogue, has sentence stems where people talk and then they mirror each other back. Well, all of that puts you in the upper brain. The lower brain, cortisol, adrenaline, flows through your bloodstream when you're reactive and someone says something and you don't mirror them, you just say what you think. But if you use the dialogue process, it takes you to the upper brain, especially the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is between the left and right brain hemispheres. And this is the place of wonder. And in this place, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, Dan Siegel says it promotes neural integration, and it releases acetylcholine, dopamine, norepinephrine, and the neurochemicals begin to flow through your body, and they relax you, and they relax the other person because you're mirroring them before you say your thoughts. But the science has just proven that people who have healthy relationships, number one, they do not get sick as often as other angry people. And number two, they live longer. And number three, the science has just come out, this can strengthen your immune system to prevent you from getting COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Helen and Harville. I must admit, talking about anxiety, that I am a little bit anxious interviewing someone who has been interviewed by Oprah Winfrey so many times. But then that does put me in a whole new category that I've never been in before. So I'm grateful for that as well.
Thank you for your questions.
17 times.
17 times with Oprah, right? Marcy, I'm going to throw it to you to talk a little bit about the Ok2say campaign, what that has done, if there's ever been and I'm going to ask you to take yourself off mute, remember to do that. And then if there's ever been a time when awareness of mental health has been really on people's minds on a regular basis, this is the time. And you folks have been at this Ok2say for a number of years. Talk to us a little bit about what that campaign is about and what resources are available to folks from your work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tony. And I have to say, before I begin kind of talking about Ok2say, that I'm a little excited because now my degrees of separation between me and Oprah just dropped down to 1. Thank you. Totally excited about that. So Ok2say is an award-winning public awareness campaign that was initiated by the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute and is supported by the Hackett Center for Mental Health. And the message is simple. It's okay to talk openly and honestly about mental health. You know, it's critical, especially now that we're able to have these conversations without all of the fear and the awkwardness that has historically been associated with the topic of mental illness. And it's important that we're able to have meaningful conversations with one another. And so with our public awareness campaign, we really want to promote speaking up. So for those individuals who may be suffering from some form of mental health issues, you know, reaching out to a family member or a friend or a loved one in order that they can help support you as you are in that mental health journey. And we also want to encourage the rest of us to share hope. Right? So if we have loved ones who we know may suffer from a mental health issue, we want to reach out. We want to be that connector and that support system to them. We just heard the power of relationships and how healthy relationships can help to heal. And so that really is a lot about what we're doing with our Ok to Say awareness campaign. And so we want to encourage people to visit ok2say.org for additional information and resources that are available there. And we've also launched a Let's Talk Coping with COVID-19 Facebook Live series that takes place on Thursdays at 2 on the Ok to Say Facebook page. And we are constantly posting additional resources that are available. And if I could have one more minute, I'm not sure if people are aware, but here in this great state of Texas, HHS have put out a resource for all Texans. It's a 1-800 number. It's a statewide mental health support so that individuals who may be feeling stress and want to talk to someone just about their experiences as it relates to stress and anxiety in our current pandemic, that they can call this number for free confidential counseling services. And it's a 1-800 hotline number.
Appreciate that and appreciate all the great work that you're doing. So thank you for all of that. I'm going to, given our conversation and your great information about the resources that are available, I'm going to ask everyone but Brad to put your mute button on, because I'm getting some feedback and we ask our audience's forgiveness for the tech difficulty. Brad, tell us a little bit about the services that are available in our community here in Dallas that you provide.
Absolutely. The center has served the community for 50 years, and I've been involved for 25 plus of those years, and certainly have never seen a time like this. But the challenge for us has always been eliminating barriers to professional help for mental health related issues. So we have always been about encouraging relational well-being, emotional well-being, mental well-being, caring for mind, body, and spirit, along with our relationships. And there are many barriers to getting mental health care. They can be geography. We go into churches and physician groups to go to where people live, work, play, and pray. We have 31 locations from Dallas to Waco, from Rockwall to Arlington, and we want to be where people are, because as people's day related to work and their home life, we want to make it as easy as possible for them to get the help they need. We also take insurance. So we want people to be able to use their health benefits for a health issue, and that is mental health. So all of that is helping families, helping parents concerned about their kids at school, helping those dealing with trauma or abuse, helping those wanting to improve their relationship or facing a relational crisis. Some other barriers to getting mental health care include finances, include language. For that work, we go into communities where there is poverty, and we collaborate with other nonprofits. So groups like Brother Bill's Helping Hand in West Dallas, North Dallas Shared Ministries, the Salvation Army. We partner with these organizations to be where people are, and where people are already receiving other services that they trust and therefore it makes that on-ramp to counseling that much easier. So right now, we're all facing a barrier to getting the care that we need. Right now, we've been dealing with our own individual and family crises, but we're all dealing with a united crisis and then with the pandemic. And so our goal is to still go to where people are, and that means to their homes through telecounseling. So when the pandemic began developing, we shifted to 100% telecounseling. So people are able to get counseling via phone, via video. Video obviously is ideal because we're able to see the face of the other. We're thankful that some insurance companies are even making accommodations. They for sure are covering telecounseling, but in some cases they're covering copays. And so we have a client services team, a leadership team, and then our therapists who have been so flexible, so innovative in problem solving to make the care available that is needed. So again, our focus is reducing those barriers, and at this time, we're already dealing with that level of stress in our lives. And now the pandemic, finances, anxiety, anxiousness adds to that stress. And so now more than ever, we are working to make mental health care accessible. So through location, through education, and through collaboration, our goal is to help people to navigate their challenges they're facing, but also even grow through them. We've focused on our website, thecentercounseling.org, and on Facebook in providing resources related to this crisis. And most importantly, making sure people know that counseling is still available because now more than ever, our anxiety is heightened and we need to focus on maintaining care for our mental health.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you for the service that your organization has provided to Dallas for so many years. I'm going to ask Dr. Randazzo to speak for a moment about the kinds of things that you are hearing in practice, what you're hearing with your clients, and if that has changed at all in recent weeks.
Thank you, Tony, for having me. Thanks, SVP Dallas, for doing this. This is so much appreciated and required. I am amongst some very accomplished people. So thank you for including me in this. I'm going to mirror what Brad was talking about. I think we are facing a mass trauma response. What I am hearing from people is just a lot of anxiety, just a lot of physiological changes that people are having, a lot of, also struggles with technology. I think that is something new. We're used to visiting our therapists in a quaint little office and meeting one-on-one and enjoying that safe space. Now I'm like, okay, I'm going to either call you or I'm going to video call you, and I'm going to call you out if you're wearing your favorite pajamas for 3 days straight. So people they're like, no, we'll just talk on the phone. But I think what people need to know, just what Brad was talking about, counseling is still available. Insurance companies are working with us. And all my clinicians are available. We are doing telehealth 100% now. It's something is better than nothing. We have counselors available. They are talking to us. Some of the things that I think people are really wondering about, which has been the theme for the last almost week to 10 days, when is this going to end? We don't have a finite end date. And that is creating this anxiety. Initially, I think it was this interpretation of, it's going to be, weeks of Sundays and this vacation and this is great. So that elation was there initially and people were more geared up. And as the time goes by, one of my patients actually said, when is the war going to be over? And that's the response that people have. We don't have a finite date. We don't know when this is going to be over. Even when this is going to be over, what is the new normal going to look like? Defining some of those now today, preparing people that, Italy may not be your favorite holiday destination anymore, just because that's what people are going to hold on to. My 5-year-old said, "Can I hug grandma ever again?" You know, these are real questions that people are asking because there's such a fear that is engulfing our society today. So just, you know, taking one day at a time, working with it, trying to just reassure as much as we can, but also keeping a very realistic outlook. That's important. I always tell people, please recognize the symptoms, recognize reality, because if you're going to live in this delusional world that everything's going to be okay, then you're going to be up for a challenge once, you know, time goes on. So these are some of the things that we are dealing with. You know, people are being positive, people are embracing change as much as possible, people are embracing technology as much as possible. I mean, I'm technologically challenged. When they told me do, you know, sign up on Zoom, I'm like, what is that? So, you know, trying to embrace all these things, we all have to move with change. But, you know, there will be, I think, just putting that point out, this will end. This will change society. It'll change us. It'll change our outlook. But there will be positivity tomorrow. There will be something to look forward to. Creating that hope, I think, is very important for people. And trying to reframe social distancing for yourself. Try to reframe shelter in place for yourself. My 5-year-old told me, because this is the best time of my life. And I said, okay, you've only lived 5 years. What does that mean? He said, I've got both my parents attending to me 24/7. And I said, yeah, ask your parents that. But, you know, in his little world, it is working out perfectly. So I think that is positive to look out. And if we can spread that message and try to help people focus and reframe on more of the positivity, it will help you just last longer and sustain this and have, you know, take one moment and one day at a time.
Thank you, Dr. Randazzo. Michelle, I'm going to ask you to comment on something that Dr. Randazzo talked about a little bit, and that is the kind of trauma that many folks are experiencing. Obviously, many folks in our community, particularly in neighborhoods that are intentionally marginalized and under-resourced, the trauma that they have grown up with is extensive. And now this on top of it. How do we deal with trauma in communities, in organizations, in institutions, in meaningful and healthy ways that relieve some folks from what they're experiencing? You want to chat a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tony. You said something so important, which is hopefully this time is pulling all the blinders that we have had left on about inequity and how many communities are suffering so much pre-COVID, and now their suffering is so different than those of us who have comfortable, safe homes, access to green space, some savings. It's just a qualitatively different experience. And I think the other piece that I would maybe want to speak to is the organizational responsibility and the responsibility that falls to leaders right now. One thing we know about social emotional health is that it exists at the individual level, but it also exists at the family level, the organizational level, and then the community level. And we've seen some really stark examples right now, almost in technicolor, of what it looks like when an organization and a leader shows up from an emotionally intelligent posture and the kind of handheld that provides for the people that person is leading. And we've seen the harm that is done when leaders are approaching this time from a place of, from a fear-based place that is experienced as tone deaf and not responsive and even rigid. So, you know, there are a few things that we're seeing consistently working. One is when people communicate and communicate often, our brains fill in the gaps in the absence of communication. And so, especially in times of high anxiety, if I don't know what's going on, I'm going to tilt in the direction of assuming negative, and that's going to feed my anxiety. So for people who are in a position of leadership, defined broadly, influence and the responsibility of communicating is one. The other is to be checking in with a posture of genuine curiosity. The companies that I've been working with, I've been encouraging them to set up a safety net so that every single person is checked in with at least every 2 weeks, and have given 5 questions to act as like a guide. And one is how are you and how are your loved ones? But not in a throwaway manner, a deep, curious question around that. And in pre-COVID, that could have felt a bit intrusive. But I think right now we're all seeing that we need to tilt in the direction of erring on the side of people feeling seen and felt, and be less worried about intrusion, although still paying attention to that. But the second question is, what resources do you need? The answers to that are going to be new and surprising sometimes. And connected to that, how can I help you? The fourth question is really important. The fourth question is, what are you noticing that's working that I can share with others? And the reason that is important is it tilts our brains in the direction of tracking on how we are relating to this crisis and self-advocacy. And so if somebody is asking me what's working and what can I share with others, in between those check-ins, I'm going to start scanning my environment for what am I doing that's helping, and how can I put myself in a position of being part of the solution for other people too. And then the last question with those check-ins is just, what have we not talked about? What have we not addressed that would be helpful? We are in completely new territory right now. And so the capacity as a leader to open space is going to be tremendously important, so that whatever needs to surface can surface. And then the other 2 things we're seeing leaders do that's making a big difference. One is leading with a posture of flexibility and generosity. My friend James Tippett calls it persistent generosity. And that also requires leaders to unhook from that fear-based thinking. You have to come from a love-based thinking in order to provide that space of generosity and flexibility. And then the last one is leaders, we have to regulate our own nervous systems. It's very difficult to give what you don't possess. And so if a leader is dysregulated and in a bit of a hot mess state themselves, generally speaking, that's going to create that kind of contagion for their teams and their organizations and their communities. So taking good care of ourselves is a critical piece of this puzzle right now, so that we can create that space for other people.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to ask Helen and Harville to comment on this briefly, Michelle, and then I'm going to come back to you and ask you to take us through a breathing exercise that might make us all a little bit more relaxed and put us in the present moment so that we can get the most out of this. Helen and Carl Jung famously said, there is no consciousness, without pain. There is no consciousness without suffering. And in many, I'm going to weave in a couple of questions from the, and with the other speakers put their microphones on mute for a moment. Helen and Harville, I'm going to weave this into a couple of questions that the audience has been asking around, the minority communities, and you could say this for most men in our culture, that talking about mental health, talking about anxiety, talking about these issues, mental health issues, is taboo. And the conversation, the consciousness has been raised so much because the pain is so intense that we have to be able to talk about these issues in all communities and all genders. What is the role of pain in lifting our denial? And now that the denial has been lifted, what are some techniques that folks can use to get the resources immediately that they need to be able to practice some open conversation and open dialogue about these things?
So shall I make a I think the first thing that that I'd like to say is that one of the things that we've discovered in our now 40-something plus years of sitting with couples and with other people and in large groups across the world is we come up with a sentence that talking is the most dangerous thing most people do. And that because talking tends to presume that other people are on your wavelength and that they are participating in your reality. And so, and the second thing is that listening is the most infrequent thing that people do. And that most of us listen waiting until the talker finishes, then so we can talk. And listening is not happening. And when listening is not happening, i.e., you know listening is happening, when you're changed by what you hear, and if you're not changed by what somebody is saying, you're hearing, but not listening. So when you do listen, the regulation of your own emotions increases because, as Helen said earlier, when you're listening, you have to go to what we call the upper brain, the prefrontal cortex, in order to listen. And there are no emotions in the prefrontal cortex. All the emotions are in the midbrain. So that listening is critical for one's own self-regulation, and it simultaneously regulates the interaction with the other person. So when talking and listening are balanced, both are engaged in both speaking responsibly and listening without judgment, then you have something that all human beings crave, which is the experience of connecting with that person with whom you're having this interaction. And so connecting can come through language, and it can also be broken by language. And so we have an opportunity in this time of being housed in quarantine with the people we live with to learn how to do that. And I was thinking while I was hearing the other reports is that when this is over, and it will be over, we will be, when it's over, what we are now while we're dealing with it. However we deal with it will go into our future. So we have an opportunity to go into a future knowing how we can experience authentic connection with everyone by learning how to experience authentic connection with each other, whether it's with your partner, whether it's with your partner and children, or whoever you're interacting with, that this is an opportunity to, we call it move to another level of human evolution, which is to go to connecting beyond polarization. So Helen wants to make a comment, and then I think we would like to take a minute and just show you what this conversation looks like that we call safe.
Yeah, we can show you what it's like when Tony says,
yes,
like you're the moderator, and we may not have time, but if we do, we can do that sooner or later. But Tony, you have lifted up Carl Jung's quote, "There is no birth of consciousness without pain." When I was dating Harville, I wanted to be a Jungian analyst, and I love Carl Jung, and that's one of my favorite quotes. And it really should be lifted up because everyone is suffering. And so people go, oh, we hate the suffering. But what Jung would say, if you hold the suffering in the right way, the suffering can birth a whole new consciousness. And so, so what I would say is that I love Marcelina saying, it's okay to ask for help. Like, let's embrace that we're all struggling and suffering and in pain right now, because pain isn't an enemy. It can birth something new, a whole new way to be. And I love, Michelle, you're talking about just, I'm sorry, your notes. I mean, it had to do with more of Carl Jung. I think what I think our work does is it invites a dialogue. And Michelle, you said people, it's painful if you're not seen. What the dialogue process teaches people to do is to learn to see each other before we give our view. Like if someone talks, mirror them and see if you got it right. And then you can say what you think, but it's learning to see each other. And Michelle, I love how you took that. It's in your relationship, but also in your community. Like, what if North Dallas saw the pain of South Dallas and could respond and make South Dallas feel seen? And South Dallas could see North Dallas, and they struggle in other ways, you know. And so we can't just block people out. And I love, Michelle, how you took that to the community and in a way from local to global. Oh, and so the last thing I would say about our work is we invite, after we teach people the safe conversation dialogue process with something simple like a mirroring of each other, then we use that process of dialogue to share a frustration that we have. We say, how are we in pain with the other person? But we, quote, convert a frustration into a request.
That's great. So I definitely want to hear one of those techniques in action. I don't know how well these things are received with our current technology, but I want to do that a little bit later in our session. And so I'm going to throw it to Michelle to do our first exercise and see how that goes with the breathing. All of these exercises, what Helen and Harville are talking about, what Michelle's going to do, these are exercises that help us reduce our stress, help us lower the anxiety, help us move into the present. So Michelle, I love what you do with, I think you call it, you settle your glitter. I think that's a term that you use. My wife is very creative and she thinks the glitter should be outlawed. So I'm interested to hear your take on glitter, and I'm going to throw it over to you, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that's a momentous institute thing that in learning how to teach even 3-year-olds about their brain, and as Helen and Harville were saying, on how to settle their amygdala so that their prefrontal cortex can come online. We use glitter balls and we teach them to focus their attention on settling the glitter so that they can see clearly and make good decisions. And that translates to adulthood as well. Breathing is one of the most researched, most accessible ways for us to regulate our nervous system. And when our nervous system is regulated, we will engage with crisis in a completely different way. And when our nervous system is not regulated, we will engage with the calmest possible situation like a mad woman. Because it's what's happening in us that affects what happens between us. And so this exercise is called box breathing. It was developed by a Navy SEAL. It's used by the armed forces, by lots of professional sports teams. It's used in education. And we're going to put a graphic up. It's very simple. I'll tell you what you'll see. We'll do 4 seconds inhale, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds exhale, 4 seconds hold. And Sean, if you'll hold that for 1 second, I just want to give them a heads up on it. In doing this exercise, for some people, this will be very comfortable and enjoyable. For other people, you're going to prefer to just breathe in 4, breathe out 4, if holding the breath is anxiety provoking. We'll breathe in. Let's just do it. I think I'm getting my cue from Sean that we'll do it. I'll walk you through it. Okay, go ahead and exhale. Breathe in. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Breathe in. Hold. Exhale. hold. We'll do 2 more. Breathe in, hold, exhale, hold, breathe in, hold, exhale, and hold. And then you can return to normal breath. If you're interested in developing more of a breathing practice and not sure where to start, I would point you to either the Headspace app, the 10% Happier app, Calm, or Insight Timer. All of those have some free content and a great place to start if you want to bring this into your daily life.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We're all learning new techniques. We have to because of the changing situation. One of the issues that we wonder about, and one of our audience members posed a question about, how much of this do you think we can sustain after the pandemic starts to ease and life will be back a bit the way it was before? Lots of issues around how do we engage minority communities, cultures into understanding that it's okay to say. Marcy, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the diverse cultures and how are we reaching them and what kinds of availability will be to them to help them now and after the things start to get back to normal a bit.
Yes, thank you, Tony. One of the things, again, and I'm going to bring this up, I think I noticed the question of the 1-800 number. So Texas Human Services launched this 1-800 number to reach out to everyone. And what's so important about this is that, it's free, it's confidential, and it's a way for individuals to begin to engage in the therapeutic process, even if this isn't something that they've experienced or have done before. And we're really kind of focusing on the same symptomology that we've heard everyone talk about, this increased anxiety, this increased fear, and this increased worry. And I think the more that we can talk openly about it, the easier it's going to be for people to pick up the phone and make that phone call. So I want to not get too sidetracked, and I want to give the number. It's 1-833-986-1919. And again, this was launched by the Texas Health and Human Services, and it's operated by the Harris Center and IDD. And so the more that we can talk about how we are more similar than we are dissimilar, and that even though we're all going through this pandemic, we all have very different experiences. And I think we've heard lots of different panelists talk about those different experiences. Some of us are we're sheltering in place in a home with family, and we are fortunate enough that we have enough space that we're not all on top of one another. But we have lots of individuals within our community that may be sheltering in place where it's multi-generations in a very confined space. And so that is very much anxiety producing. One of the things I like to remind people is during moments of crisis, we all go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And, for some people, it's hard for them to kind of think about addressing their emotional space, especially if that bottom layer of, where are they living? Do they have enough food? So those very basic needs, it's important that those needs are met in order that they can then be in a place to talk about their mental and emotional states. And so, I really, again, want to encourage individuals, that if they are, worried or feeling anxious, and they're not quite sure where to start, just to pick up the phone and call that 1-800 number, and let's start the conversation there. Again, that number is 833-986-1919. I'm going to toss it back to you, Tony.
Thank you so much for that information. Dr. Randazzo, I want you to jump in on a comment about how people can reach out across cultures for therapy. There are some folks that strongly believe that a person has to be from their background, look like them, in order to really be able to understand their experience. Of course, as therapists, we don't necessarily agree with that. We believe that, the people understand at the very basis of humanness, there are all kinds of connection points. And in fact, a therapist perhaps should be more neutral than being identifiable, if you will. Perhaps that's old school talking, but how do you understand that, and how do you make yourself available to multicultural folks in the therapeutic setting?
Thank you, Tony. That's an important aspect that's come up now. I think the bottom line is recognize, understand, and make sure that people know that even though they are from different cultures, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, it is all a common fear. So, when I actually had somebody, I'm Indian, if you all couldn't tell, my accent hasn't gone away 20 years. And some Indian person called me the other day and they said, oh, we're immune to COVID-19 because we heard on the news that the BCG vaccine that we got when we were little really doesn't affect us and we've got immunity. Now, there are stories that are going around like that. I talk a lot about boundaries as well. I had families that say, oh, I have my child and my grandmother living together under the same roof. And, how am I going to protect these? I think at the end of the day, anxiety is anxiety. It doesn't matter what ethnicity, what cultural background, where you're coming from. You have to reach out if you are experiencing it. Now, whether it's faith-based or it's, there is a lot of taboo, not only in just what Tony was talking about, just the males coming out and talking about this, there's taboo with cultural expectations. People ask me, how did you become a psychologist? You're Indian. Shouldn't you pray your fear away? Yes, I do pray every single day, but at the same time, I think that scientific knowledge, that understanding of what's going on is really important. I tell people across whoever I talk to, whatever ethnicity you come from, whatever cultural background you come from, acknowledge your discomfort, acknowledge your symptoms. If somebody is getting irritable, if somebody is getting frustrated, it doesn't matter where you're from. Frustration is frustration. So the more we can reach out and spread that word that everybody is experiencing anxiety, everybody is experiencing a common threat, I think it normalizes for people and then helps people talk about it a little bit more.
Thank you so much. That was a great response to that. Michelle, we've had a couple of questions about how do we talk to our kids? What are some tips for managing our children? Why don't you share a little bit from your experience about working with our children and working with the youth in our culture today?
I think the biggest thing to know about kids is that they're taking their cues from the adults in their immediate sphere. And so if their parents are highly dysregulated and having a hard time managing this and not seeking support adult to adult, then that's going to leak into their child's experience of safety and security. So that's the first thing. The biggest thing we can do for our kids is to, again, regulate our own nervous system and manage our own anxiety and seek adult to adult support instead of creating a situation where children are asked to hold adult worries. And that boundary also goes with what are they hearing. If you want to watch the news or listen to a podcast, if you can use earphones, really managing what they're hearing, and then creating space for them to ask questions and for you to respond to their questions. And also spending some time thinking about the different developmental stages you went through as a child and how you might be experiencing something as dramatic as what we're going through right now. There is no one on the planet that is fine right now. There are people who are more than fine because they're engaging with this pandemic in a spiritual way. They're understanding that this is a call to higher consciousness, but nobody is just status quo. And that goes for the children in our lives right now too. So even if they seem okay, creating space for them to ask questions, for you to provide comfort, care, and age-appropriate answers is key. And then for parents, I would just watch a few things. Changes in sleep, changes in eating, changes in desire to do things that they used to want to do. And if those concerns persist over days and even up to 2 weeks, then I would definitely seek some support. That's what comes to mind, Tony, but let me know if there's anything else you need me to cover.
Really appreciate that. I'm going to throw it to Brad and ask Brad to talk a little bit about the kinds of therapy that the center offers. Do you offer therapy for children? Are you using art and music in therapy? Talk to us about the work that you all are doing, in particularly around children, maybe around art, as one of our audience members has asked that question. How are we integrating art and music into therapy?
Right. So we do work with preschoolers, children, teens, adults, couples, all ages, and our work with children even continues with telecounseling. So we are focused on engaging the child. It's different, but art, activities, and then also digital resources have been some creative ways that our therapists continue to connect with our clients. We always believe in the importance of working with parents and caregivers and the entire family. So some of the clients with whom we've been working, as I've checked in with our therapists, they've talked about those worries about the future, those financial worries. We certainly are concerned about heightened rates of abuse in the home as people are confined together. And so our therapists are finding that by reaching out, families are open. We talked earlier about the fact that there might be multi-generations in a home. So we've had to be creative about finding ways to have that time. We have 30 plus therapists. And as I have checked in with them, one thing they have said is that people's defenses are reduced. So we use busyness as a defense mechanism. We use our jobs as a defense mechanism. And so this time is unique because it's calling on people to really build up those coping skills, to build up those techniques. And so whether it be with children, with having them draw a picture of their anxiousness, but then also drawing a picture of their gratitude, we're helping them express themselves. And that is what child therapy is about, whether it's play therapy or other forms of therapy with kids. It's helping them use their language. I will say too, that another important development is our awareness of our interconnectedness. We have an office in McKinney, and First McKinney talked to us about being on a resource list for the city of McKinney. And so that's one thing that I think we need to take into the future, is that importance of working together to make counseling accessible so that people can get the help that they need. So we continue to provide counseling for children as well as couples, working to provide assessments. Our psychologists always are providing assessments, helping with children as well as adults. And so we're just having to find creative ways to do that right now.
Tony, can I add to what Brad and Michelle are talking about? Can I get a minute?
Absolutely.
So I think when it comes to kids, they're exactly on point. But I think one of the things that we've been seeing is parents are playing these roles of teachers and nannies and caretakers and grandparents and parents and everybody. So there's this multitude of hats coming up. And so parents are like, how do I recognize that my child without communicating is really going through some of the anxieties. So watch out for behaviors. I think watch out for any child that is not acting the way that they used to. If they're more stubborn than usual, if they're crying a lot more, if they're more irritable than usual, or even if they're more clingy than usual. Any changes in the normal behavior of your child, notice that, and that could be then a conversation had. Please address symptoms and situations with children. We don't give them enough credit. Once you talk to them, if you're using art, discuss what they have drawn and where it's coming from. The other thing that I think parents are not allowing is we're sticking to such a structure. If you go on social media, you'll see these beautiful, no fault of people who are doing this. 9:15, you wake up. 9:20, you play with the dog. 9:21, you eat your breakfast. 9:22, you do this. This kind of structure, I think it's an overkill for children right now. You have to allow the child and give them some level of control. We don't have control right now over anything. So if you can allow the child to choose his own breakfast, it doesn't matter if it's 9:29 or 10:05, what difference is it going to make? But if you allow that child to have control, even with the adults, a little bit of control will give you that sense of satisfaction, give you that sense of accomplishment, which then makes you feel, okay, I'm okay, rather than constantly imposing these timelines and structures onto children these days. That's my 2 cents.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think it's a good time to try another exercise. I know technology is a little bit demanding, but I'm going to throw it over to Helen and Harville to lead us in an exercise that we might use in our homes with our children, with the people that we are sheltering in place with. So I'm going to turn it over to Helen and Harville.
Thanks, Tony. Well, we'd like to demo briefly what a safe conversation looks like. And before I demo it with Helen, and Helen and I are going to demo it, I think, Brad, you're going, let me just finish what Brad's going to do with us. I want to say what safe conversation is, and that is that it's a carrier of any topic. So you don't have to have a topic. You can have any topic. It's sort of like a truck. We'll take any cargo to market. So we think it's so appropriate to teach safe conversations to the public now because there are so many topics to talk about, but there is a way to talk about all of them which connect rather than polarize. So that's what we'd like to demo.
And so one person sends a message and they're the sender, and the other person doesn't send a message back. First, they mirror what the sender said. They receive the message, and that person is called the receiver. And 5 minutes before we started taping the show, we had sort of thrown out yesterday, well, maybe we could do a dialogue, not just talk about it. And so 5 minutes before, like we were on discussing as a group, and someone said, well, look, I'm willing to offer to be in a dialogue. And that was Brad. Mm-hmm. And then I said, well, I'm willing to be in dialogue with him. And so Harville's going to lead Brad and me in a dialogue. And this is the way you're taught doing a dialogue. One person's a sender. And like in this case, Brad, I will send you a message. Wait.
Yeah, you'll send a message.
Yeah. And then you mirror me. And Harville will guide you through the learning the dialogue by sharing an appreciation.
Yeah. And the way I'll do that is that in teaching people to do this, we teach them to use specific, what we call sentence stems, because it regulates the flow and the sequence of the conversation. And those stems also, because they're used by the prefrontal cortex, relax the person using them. And because that person is using them, the amygdala of the other person is relaxed. So it creates, fundamentally, the structure creates safety. And Sean, I'm wondering, you're in the back room of this, is it possible to put us in two different Zoom rooms, or so that we can both be on the screen at the same time, or not. I don't know what our technology is about that, and we didn't plan it ahead of time. If not, we'll just use it like it is.
Well, while they're deciding that, let me just say to the viewing person, if you learn safe conversations on something simple like an appreciation, you practice the technology of the speaking and listening, then you can deal it with frustrations. So you start with an appreciation, and then you can say something you're frustrated about, and you turn the frustration into a request.
Okay, so so we got the message that we can both, and we're all being seen, but we can't just go into the two Zoom rooms.
Okay.
All right. So Brad, thank you very much for being willing to do this. And so we said safe conversation is like it's a carrier, like a truck, and it can take anything to market. And what Helen is going to put on the truck in the as the topic is an appreciation of you. And I'm going to set her up with that, with the sentence stems, as though she doesn't know anything about it, so that they can be really clear. And I want to give her those sentence stems, and I give you the sentence stems about responding. And if we have enough time, then we'll switch, and you can send Helen a message. And so, but Tony, you'll have to regulate how much time and whether or not we should do both. And we'll be real.
Oh no, I think it should definitely be both ways. Oh, Brad and I will be synced.
Okay, you'll be succinct. Okay, so we're going to do it both ways.
And I just want to say, this is for, like, strangers can give each other an appreciation. Brad and I don't know each other, and we often teach this to people who are strangers, and just pick, like Brad and I don't know each other, but pick anything, like the color of their hair, or the tie they're wearing, or their earrings, or it could be anything.
Or whatever. Yeah. And it also going to be an appreciation, but it could also be a frustration. Which is
we're going to start with the appreciation.
I understand that, but for the audience, if they want to use this to share frustration, it's the same process. It's just a different content. So, and those are the two things most human beings share: frustrations and appreciations. But they tend to share more frustrations than they do appreciations. But either way, the safe conversation connects rather than polarizes. So Helen.
I'll just take the appreciation today, if that's okay.
Just take the, we just practice with an appreciation, and that makes sense. And that's the way we started anyway, so that people have a positive topic for the first learning phase. So Helen, you're going to send Brad an appreciation. So the first thing that I would like you to do is do what we call the appointment process, which is to ask Brad if he's available to receive a frustration. And the reason we want you to do that is he might not be available for an appreciation. So if he weren't, or you didn't ask him, then you would just be crashing into his movie house where he's watching his own movie in his own mind, and you would be taking his screen. So we want you to ask him, is it okay for you to come in and put something on his screen about him from you? So the stem is, so Brad, is now a good time to share with you an appreciation?
So Brad, I know we're on the middle of this thing, but is now a good time when I could share with you an appreciation?
It is, Helen. Thank you.
Yes, and that's the stem. Yes, I'm available. So, and then
no, but if you're not, you can say, how about 30 minutes?
Yeah.
Or an hour.
Yeah, right. If we're not doing this exercise live, and then we use Michelle's technique of just a breathing exercise, but this time we do it with eye contact, insofar as we can do that across the medium of Zoom, just to make eye contact, meaning just to stop and center for just a second or two or three before you start talking. So both of you make that connection. So Helen, here's the sentence stem. Brad, the appreciation I have for you is.
Brad, though I don't even know you, although we've had a couple 30 minutes yesterday and a little bit of time today, I really like the jacket you're wearing.
So Brad, would you say, well, let me see if I got that. That's your sentence. So if I got that, the appreciation you have of me is?
Okay, so let me see if I've got that. If I've got it, the appreciation you have of me is you like my jacket.
Did I get it?
Yeah.
And then you check.
Did I get that?
And that's called the check for accuracy thing. Did I get it?
Yes, thank you for mirroring me exactly.
And is there more about that? And that's the curiosity question. Is there more about that, about my jacket?
Is there more about that?
Well, there was something when I had to think of something, there was something about that navy blue. It's not a favorite color of mine, but the navy blue really looks great on you. And I just sort of like, I don't know, I was drawn to say how much I sort of appreciate the presentational self that you've had on this webinar.
So if I got that, the more is?
So if I got that, the more is you have appreciated the Navy and my presentational self. Did I get that?
So is there more about that?
Is there more about that?
And so the next more is, well, when I see that, what I appreciate in you, I feel, it triggers a feeling.
Well, what I felt was there's a stature in this person wearing this navy blue jacket. I just felt, I appreciated that you have a strong but gentle but strong presence.
And when I see that strong, gentle presence, it makes me feel. What's the
And
feeling?
then, so then I feel sort of safe
Sort of
that what's
self-safe.
going to come out of your mouth, I'm going to enjoy listening to.
So if I got that, when you see all that in me, you feel.
Okay, so I think I've got that when you see that in me, you feel safe.
Did I get that?
Yes.
So is
Did
there
I
more
get that?
So is there more about that?
Is there more?
So the more, Helen, is when I feel safe, it reminds me of something in my past, something maybe when I was little.
So I apologize, folks. I'm gonna interrupt. I assume that the dialogue is something that is on the Safe Conversations website that folks can learn more about the process.
Sure.
We're gonna run way out of time if we keep going this way.
Okay, Tony, I don't want to cut you off, but can I just say one thing?
Just real quickly.
What it reminded me of, and I got tears in my eyes, my dad wore a jacket that color all the time. And I didn't have a relationship with my mom or my dad, but in the last 2 years, I've been reading about my father, H.L. Hunt, and he always wore a jacket like that. And so I just have been tearing up thinking about doing this appreciation to you, because I've just discovered who my dad is, and I love my dad now. So
Okay.
This dialogue can be very powerful.
And so that was most of it. Then it would be just wrapping it up.
So I certainly appreciate that.
SafeConversations.com, and you can find Safe Conversations there.
And I have been a part of your workshops where you have much more time to go into this, and it really is a wonderful technique to use in dealing with, and it does help you hear, listen better, and lower the stress in the relationships. We just have a few more minutes together, and I want everyone to share a little bit about, in the context of one topic that we haven't dealt with. There are many topics that we have not dealt with, but the one is grieving. There is an enormous amount of grief that people are experiencing during this time. Loss celebrations, all kinds of losses that people grieve. And in our culture, we're not that great at dealing with grief. And again, we sometimes substitute other emotions for grief, like anxiety or anger or preoccupation or all kinds of things. But I'd like each of you to just talk a little bit about grief and a little bit about what you have learned yourself, how your life has changed as a result, and what you have learned going forward. And if you, Dr. Randazzo, if you would start that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony. Yes, grief is difficult. We all shy away from it. I particularly am not good with it. I've been fortunate to not have too many losses in my life, but I experience now when you are trying to be as empathetic with your clients, you're experiencing that and seeing you're very fortunate, to have your family close. But there are people who are, alone, like a lot of seniors that are by themselves and missing, their grandchildren or their families because we have shelter in place. So just to be as authentic with them, I think I often share my own vulnerabilities, and I tell them, look, it sucks for me. I'm horrible when it comes to being on Zoom and on video conferencing. I like that one-on-one. So they join you in your understanding of what's going on. I think what I'm learning from this is embrace change. I am change averse, and that is the only constant that we have learned. I am trying to embrace change as much as possible. I am trying to be as patient with myself. I am not one that waits for things to happen. I plan it and I make it happen. That is something I can't do now. So I'm trying to be patient with myself. I think the other thing that I am really, really aware of is the multitude of hats. Again, I'm reiterating what I said earlier, that each one of us is wearing. We are playing caretaker, we are playing parent, we are playing nanny, we are playing cook, we are playing, the teacher. And if you can be nice to yourself at this point, like create a safe space. I had spoken about timeout in one of the videos that I had done. Please take the negative connotation of timeout away from yourself and tell your family, I am going into timeout, so leave me alone for 10 minutes, please. Which is important for you to just gather yourself and then come back and then be that caretaker or be that parent that you need to be. So a lot of changes, but I think if we take it one moment at a time, one day at a time, understand, recognize your own vulnerabilities. We're not all perfect. I claim to be perfect. I'm not. It's coming out a lot now. I'm recognizing a lot of my own flaws. Let your patients, let the people around you know that, and have them help you help them. That's really, really important. So that's my two cents. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Michelle, speak a little bit about your understanding of the grieving process and what you have learned and how this period has changed you.
Thank you, Tony. The grieving process is so challenging, but one of the things that comes with it is our defenses fall away, and a lot of our armor falls away, and we can see with clarity what really matters, what aligns with our values and our purpose. We can see each other more clearly. And so the idea that we're having a global collective grief process is scary, but it also is heartening, because if that is the case, then everyone's defenses are down, everyone is seeing things more clearly, everyone is more deeply connected to what really, really matters to them. And I think that can lead us into a wholly different future. So while this is costing people their lives and their livelihood and a sense of normalcy, in the end, it could very well save us. And I think grief, well-felt grief, saves us. It saves us over and over and over again, and it creates a kind of texture and depth that can only come through going through that type of pain. So I'm heartened that we are having that collective experience, and I'm heartened by our capacity to show up for each other during that. And I think I'm learning so much personally during this time. One of the things I'm learning is to be gentle with myself and watch for ways I can create space for other people to be gentle to themselves and for themselves. And the other thing I'm paying attention to is that when there's this level of disruption, if I come out of it operating out of the same winning formula that worked for me up to this point, then I've really missed an opportunity. So every day I'm just trying to see how I can show up at the level of the magnitude of the crisis and mind for what is there for us, in hopes that I can be part of us coming out of it on the other side, more conscious, more kind, more compassionate, more equitable, and more present. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Marcy, how about you?
Trying to get the mute button unmuted. You know, as we are all experiencing grief, one thing as I've worked with individuals as they process their grief is it's done individually and collectively. So oftentimes, you know, if there is a loss of a loved one or a loss of a job, you know, there are individuals within our life that we can, you know, help us through that grieving process. And right now, as we're all sheltering in place, the risk of loneliness as we grieve, whether it's the loss of a job or the loss of our just daily routines, you know, that the risk of that loneliness is escalated to a whole nother level. And so, you know, I think it is so important through this process that while we are maintaining social distancing, that we still remain connected, that we remain connected with one another, with our family members, with our friends, with our neighbors. We can connect while still maintaining social distance. So using the technology that is available to us, right? So whether we are, you know, doing Zoom dinners with family members or FaceTiming or WhatsApping with friends, making sure that we stay connected. Because, you know, again, as you're going through that grieving process, and I think we've heard a lot through some of our wonderful panelists, you know, we will heal through our relationships with one another. And so we have to make sure that we are maintaining those relationships and those connections.
Thank you, Marcy. Appreciate that. Brad, how about you?
I'm going to say that my personal biggest loss is that loss of connection with my colleagues at work, the ability to meet, but then also relate and interact. And so definitely am missing my normal routines of people that I see, friendships. But at the same time, it has made me realize and remember that importance of the sense of self. So this is a time of reflection in many ways, so that my goal is to be the healthiest self I can be in those relationships. Another loss that we're definitely seeing is that loss of a sense of control. Our center does honor faith, and we do welcome people integrating spirituality in their therapy. And so we have questions of where do we find meaning? Where do we find and put our trust and focus on what really does matter in life? And the truth of the matter is we aren't in control ever. And so I'm also learning about that personally, but then thinking about that in our work with others. So important too to realize the disparities in our communities. And so lack of a sense of control in one community is different in another. And so that importance of compassion and being intentional about making sure that we are serving and helping in all of those instances. So that loss of connectedness, but it has been gratifying to see families walking together and finding new ways to be together. And the hope is that we can continue with that as a priority as we move past this crisis.
Thank you, Brad. Helen, I'm going to turn it to you. How has this changed you?
So the grieving is deadly, and the virus is deadly, and it's killing so many and killing hopes and dreams, and it's horrible, and it's very sad. However, for the first time since I've ever been alive, the world is united to fight the COVID virus. um, I, we've never seen the nations all unified with a common enemy. And so I just go back to your quote that you raised, Carl Jung, that pain is the birth of consciousness. Like, so the last thing I'll say is, I wonder what's trying to happen. You know, what is going on that we're all grieving? And could this be the birth of something positive and a step forward in human civilization?
Thank you, Helen. Harville, how about you?
So I was thinking about how this has changed me, and as I have two responses to that. And one is, I'm pretty much of a loner and an isolator, and spend time writing and lecturing, and so therefore, except for traveling to go talk and do workshops and so forth, my life has not been changed much because I'm inside a lot. But I'm thinking about the way that has changed me is that I've always had the awareness and the peculiar awareness that the major danger to human beings is other human beings, and that therefore all of our lives and all cultures prepare for to protect themselves from other human beings in some way, and so we'll go to war, or we'll do all kinds of things to do that. But it had been kind of abstract to me that that's just a fact, that we do that and the human race does that. And what I'm experiencing is that when Helen and I take a walk, I see another human being coming, and I'm now existentially aware that there's a possibility this human being could be a carrier, and that therefore human beings are dangerous, and I'm dangerous to them. And therefore we move apart instead of toward, which goes counter to, I think the phrase that is wrong is that we should do social distancing. I think we do physical distancing and social connecting. And I noticed that my fear that I might be infected is such that I have to make myself even look at the person that I'm avoiding by 6 feet as I walk off the sidewalk or they walk off the sidewalk. So what in some sense is that's how it changed me. And the commenting about grief is aware that something that you want is no longer real, no longer there. And ultimately grief is acceptance that it's not. And because if you hold on to it, you won't grieve, you'll just hold on to it, and it will injure your immune system. It will interfere with your life. Grief has to be done. Grief is letting go what is for what is coming, i.e. the letting go the past for the present. And therefore it's a transition. It's a transition to the future. And if we do that, then everything will go back to, because the brain wants to know what's going to happen tomorrow. And am I going to live tomorrow? The brain is only interested in survival. Am I going to live tomorrow? And so we actually have to let the present go to get to tomorrow. And I think since we've had a world trauma, we are in a world trauma, that grief is going to be universal, and that we are all going to have to go through. Reality is now not yesterday. Reality is today, and how we get through it today will determine what reality will be tomorrow. So that's what comes up for me when you ask the question about how this has changed me. It's life has become really serious, and fear became really real. And I'm really aware that the challenge just in our mind and relationship with Helen is to be today what we want to be tomorrow. And that's my challenge every day.
Thank you so much, Helen and Harville, and thank you all to each of you on the panel. One of the most striking things for me since I started these series is every panelist that I have reached out to has been so gracious and so generous with their yes, I will be there, and changing schedules to be there. And so my deepest gratitude to each of you, not only for that, but for your life's work, for the healing that you provide to the community and to the folks that you have encountered. You know, Stephen Covey, in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, did a marvelous section on paradigms and talked about how we all walk around with these constructed paradigms and these conditioned paradigms. And oftentimes it is pain that takes those maps away, and we're left to see a whole new world. And we certainly are all left to see a whole new world. And in this world that we are facing, we need immediate support now for great organizations that are on the front lines, for the people that are on the front lines. We need long-term support. There are no easy and fast solutions to any of this for anyone. So I'd like to draw your attention to a couple of things. One is that today kicks off a campaign called North Texas Giving Tuesday Now, and it is starting now, and we will send out some information about that. But Social Venture Partners is asking for your support, as are many of the organizations on the front lines asking for your support through that campaign. It is a campaign where financial contributions can be made over a couple of weeks and be given to the organizations that are doing this work. It is a campaign that is put together by the United Way, the Communities Foundation, and the Dallas Cowboys. Our hats are off to all of the great organizations that are doing work to be responsive and to be responsive in strategic and impactful ways to the needs of our community. So absolutely support our work in bringing you these kinds of presentations and our work in helping nonprofits in the community, but also support all of the work that the great nonprofits of North Texas are doing. You know, in another part of my career, I had the distinct honor and learning experience of working with men and women who are in recovery for some addiction. And while we did not talk about that at this episode, you know, I learned so much from my time working with men and women recovering and using the 12 steps to recover. And I often think about the 12 steps right now and what we're going through and how useful they would be to so many folks, addiction or not, right now. But one of the wisdom slogans that the people in 12-step recovery would use and would share with me was this notion that when people were anxious and when they were confused about what to do next, they had this expression where they would say, just suit up, show up, and do the next right indicated thing. And that is probably the best advice that I have heard from anyone to get us through this time. We have to suit up, we have to show up, and just do the next right indicated thing. So I encourage our audience to do that well for one another, and to do that well for themselves. Once again, I thank each of our panelists, and I thank our audience for being with us. And we welcome you back to Social Venture Partners anytime. And thank you all so much for your time today.
And thank you, Tony, for making all this happen.
You're welcome. Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.